You're listening to Mark of the Maker. Hey everybody, you're listening to Mark of the Maker, and I'm Mark Steiner, and this is episode 21. And this episode is going to be an interview, and we'll get to that in just a minute. Let's check in with everybody, make sure we have everyone here. Michael Birch, are you here with us?
I'm here.
Okay, Mr. Tom Crine, are you here?
Yes, sir.
And the Master of Disaster, Sean Kendrick, are you here?
Hey.
All right. Well, like I said, we're going to do an interview this time, another collector interview, and it's with a friend of ours, someone we'll call a friend of the show, and that is Mr. Justin Charles Laffer. Justin, welcome to Mark of the Maker.
Hello. Good to be here.
Hey, buddy. Good to have you.
And so some of you listening will know Justin or have seen him on various forms of social media or on USN once upon a time, or maybe at shows. Some of you won't. And so we'll do kind of the same sort of thing that we've done in the past, where we asked Justin to give us a little intro about himself and where he grew up and kind of where he came from, how he got into this. And then we'll venture off into a variety of topics from there. So Justin, let's just start with kind of the basics, man. Where did you grow up? How did you, were you a city kid, a country kid? What was your whole situation?
Well, a little bit of both. City kid, country kid. Because I lived in Los Angeles growing up on Hermosa Beach, right on the Strand. So like the beach was my backyard. But around 12 or so, I moved to San Diego, and we moved to a town right outside of Encinitas and Escondido called Rancho Santa Fe. And we had probably about 17 or 18 acres out in Rancho Santa Fe. So I grew up, outside, probably 30 minutes outside of downtown San Diego, about 12 minutes to the beach. But on 18, 20 acres or so with my dad is a very eccentric dude, and he collected lots of animals and lots of weird plants and shit like that. And he's, his eccentricities is sort of what got me to the point of starting to collect things. He's collected stuff his whole life, and whether it be antiques or antique firearms. And my older brother was a big, and still is a big gun dude, collects a lot of guns. And part of that process of me growing up was going to the fairgrounds with my dad and my brother while they went and looked at antiques and guns and all this stuff. And I'm sort of an outlier in the EDC custom knife world, because I have a gun, but I'm not into guns. Really. I don't read up about them. I don't care about them. I don't obsess about them. I don't think about them like I do about knives. But the point of me saying that is that me as a little 13, 14-year-old disaffected, pissy youth walking around the fairgrounds and all the, the little Southern California, not custom, but the gun and knife shows that used to be, the lore of Ernest Emerson and stuff, in the mid 90s, that type of situation. And walking around those places, I started to find knives as a kid. And there was one knife maker in particular that I remember meeting. He's still alive. He's still making stuff, was Barry Dawson. And
nice.
Barry Dawson met me as a little kid and saw me walking around all sad and emo, one of the characteristics that I've kept throughout my entire life. And he saw me and said, "Hey, do you want to see how I make a knife?" And, this older gentleman, he's a Vietnam vet, and he just took me over to his table and he started showing me a knife that got picked up by Cold Steel called the Spike, right? And it was this really Japanese zero ground Tonto that was just fucking terrifying, right? It was a scalpel. It had one purpose at all, which was sort of, the evisceration of a human being. And just seeing the Japanese influence, the Western influence, hearing Barry's story about why he created it for, dudes in Vietnam, or I was probably after Vietnam, but dudes going to a war zone, and something about the primitiveness, the artistic representation, all the shit that was imbued within this, knife just sort of lit a fire in me. And after that, I collected, like the early Benchmades and early Chris Reeves. I had a lot of like the A2 South African integral pieces in my collection. And I remember seeing, and this was in the 90s, I remember seeing Chris Reeves folders coming out, seeing that cool stuff that was hitting the ground. And it was just that type of stuff that I loved, because I wasn't, having to spend all these times at gun shows and not really giving a shit about guns. It made a lot of sense to me, and that lit a fire in me and stuck with me for a long time.
Very cool.
Describe what you were wearing that day. I want to get an image of what
Mr. So
Laffer looked like.
The year was 1994. It was probably neon bum gear. If you remember bum gear,
unfortunately,
that, and like an LA Kings jersey, probably, and like maybe like a backward visor. I am perpetually a fashion victim. That has not changed. And my mother dressed me. My wife kind of dresses me to this day. So I'm I have no shame. I have no shame in a lot of things, but no shame.
It's a podcast. We've got to paint a visual.
All right. Yeah. Imagine a little Porky Pig looking kid walking around the Del Mar Fairgrounds in a LA Kings jersey and bum gear. And you've got a pretty good neon. Think of lots of neon.
Oh yeah, I was at that age at same time frame.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 35, right? So I was born in 1983. So in 1993 to 1994, I was 10 years old or so. I graduated high school in 2002.
Wow,
nice. Pretty awesome that you started out, learning about knives from someone like Barry Dawson. That's pretty crazy. Yeah, pretty cool.
It was very cool. And it was very cool for him to talk to me, for him to talk to my dad. And, I don't think his health is very good anymore. He stopped going to Blade Show. But I mean, I remember my first Blade Show was in 2007 or 8. And I saw that he had a table, and I ran up to him and told him, I was like, listen, Barry, you're the dude that got me into this. Like, you're to blame for everything that I've done to the community.
Well, I think they're still making quite a few knives.
They are.
I think it's the family now, right?
Yeah, and he was doing that, sort of separating. He had like a son-in-law that was making some stuff under a different name, and I think they brought it all under in one house, making it more of a sort of a production facility. I mean, I think he's always done sort of big batch work.
Right.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Very cool. So you're a guy that likes to read, right, Justin? So
I do.
So with that whole thing about kind of understanding the influences or what styles are involved in the design of Dawson's knives or anybody else's that you were looking at the time. I mean, you were pretty young, but were you already kind of paying attention to that sort of stuff and reading about where those designs came from?
I mean, a little bit. I mean, when I listen to you guys talk about design and influence, it's on another level of what I understand and comprehend about knife design. Like back then, I mean, and my taste has changed so much, and my taste continues to change year by year. I mean, I don't stick around. I mean, if you told me, even a year and a half ago that I would have just bought a custom slip joint, I would have told you you're fucking crazy, right? And I just bought a custom slip joint, right? Like I'm that dude that follows the trends. But I like it. I allow myself to contradict myself, and I find a lot of pleasure in that. I don't try and stick to like sort of a single manifesto of what I enjoy. It's changed a lot. Back then, I liked case knives a lot. I collected a lot of the case stuff, and I really liked the idea of sort of like survival aspects involved in knives. I loved the Chris Reeve knife handles that had, twine and compasses inside and all that shit. Just it made my mind sort of, go crazy with the idea of the possibilities of what a knife could do. It was like a knife was a promise. It was a promise of what
it's a dream.
Occur. It is.
Yeah,
it is.
I totally get that.
Now, did literature play any part, since you read a lot, did it play any part in the knife game for you as far as what you read? And
I mean, I could from I could probably bullshit you and say it did. Just off the top of my head, I don't think so. I mean, at the time, I mean, I'm trying to think of like what I really, as a kid, I don't remember if there was any, were any knives in Laura Ingalls Wilder, but I loved Laura Ingalls Wilder as a kid. Little House on the Prairie was like what my mom
also.
My mom made me read all the Little House on the Prairies, which is a really, big developmental book for me. And then as soon as I got into sort of like middle school, I started reading like the Ursula K. Le Guin, the Wizard of Earthsea stuff. And who was that dude that wrote all the Redwall stuff about the chipmunks and the otters that have like political, know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I read a lot of that stuff.
I have no clue.
Brian something, right?
Brian Jacques.
Huh.
Mm-hmm.
I never even heard of those books.
Yeah, it was started in 1986. It was like these fantasy creatures that live out sort of interesting sort of medieval lives, and I dug that stuff. But I was a comic book guy, right? Like comics are when we talk about literature, the stuff the greatest thing that my parents ever did for me, and it's why I have my profession. It's why I have everything that I have professionally, is because I would play hockey as a kid out in Mira Mesa, California. And there, I don't remember the name of the comic book store, but we'd have to wait, to go play hockey, right? Hockey in Southern California. That's the interesting thing, right? But that was what we did. And there was a comic book store, and in the hour or 2 hours beforehand or after my hockey game, my sister played hockey too. We would go to the comic book store, and my parents would buy me anything that I wanted to read, and they wouldn't censor me in any way at all. There was nothing off limits for what I could read. And there was, I was, just destroying Frank Miller and, all these cool things. I remember, reading, Sin City when it was completely inappropriate for me to do so at an age that I couldn't understand the sexuality and the violence in it. But there was something so, it lit a fire in me in the same way that Knives and Barry Dawson did at an early age. It really just lit this desire for narrative and context and meaning and understanding that I have with me today.
Do you think it hit sort of the primitive side of you, kind of hit you in the lizard brain?
Yeah, the atavistic aspect of me, the primitive recursive self that continues to go back. Yeah, totally.
That sounded a lot better the way you said it.
Yeah. Atavistic. Love that word.
Nice.
It's a good one.
So Justin, you said your father collected stuff and you collected knives. Did you collect other stuff as well?
Yeah, I used to collect. There was some stuff that I wasn't as passionate about. As a kid, I started collecting, some really shitty early watches, right? Like some like old, like I want to say they're like Timex military watches and stuff that I would get from old catalogs, like back of the comic book catalog type of shit. I would collect that. I loved wooden boxes for some reason. I collected a lot of wooden boxes and would have like cool, like curiosity boxes. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Like carved. I don't have any anymore. But as a kid, I loved boxes and of course comics. My brother was, I considered them to be my comics, but there was really my brother's collection of all just the most amazing, 1980s and 1990s Marvel stuff, some good DC stuff. I loved Dark Horse when it first, came out, Image stuff. That was the thing that I really enjoyed getting my hands on, and just, any chance I got to go to the mall, Del Mar Highlands Mall, and go to, the comic store was called Artifacts, Artifax. It was like part of that, early 90s extreme, the extreme thing. Now we've got the unfortunate trend of people taking out vowels from, that's like sort of the cool new hipster thing to do, is just to remove vowels from words, or, and then back then, you throw a fucking X in there to let them know that you mean business. You know what I mean?
You throw 2 X's and a Mountain Dew, you're going to the
exactly.
I'm about to blast off, bruh.
Well, now the Southern Cal type of, I can hear some of that in your voice now.
Yeah, it comes out every once in a while. When I would as a younger man, partying with my SoCal bros, I used to really let it go in the same way that like when my wife has a couple glasses of wine and gets around her Mobile, Alabama people, like I like look at her like she's a fucking stranger. Like where did that like South Alabama swamp talk woman come from? And
nice.
You know,
the views of Justin Laffer do not reflect the views.
So Southern California up to what age? And then you moved, your family moved on from there, right?
Yeah. So Southern California, through the 90s. And then, I was a senior in high school when 9/11 occurred. So I remember that it was my senior year in high school. And, so the year after that, I, got accepted. I was looking at colleges and, was looking at the University of Chicago, looking at USC, looking at some East Coast schools, and I decided on Vanderbilt University, which is a propitious choice. I moved to Nashville not knowing a lot about it, and was there in Nashville from 2003 to 2007. At that same time, my family, my brother works for my father, and my father and mother were looking to move from Southern California. They were sort of tired of California for the reason that a lot of the people are tired of California or Illinois or any of the states that have large population migrations. And they were looking at Austin, Texas, and they were looking at Nashville, Tennessee. So having me being in Nashville was sort of like the deciding factor. I tried to get the fuck away from my family, and my family decided to chase me halfway across the United States and move in, in the neighborhood close to me. So, my collecting took like a 4-year hiatus from 2003 to 2006 or 7. I still like had my case knives, but I'm in college, right? I was interested in drugs and girls and studying, and less on, the eccentricities of, case knife designs. So I really took a break from then. So I got back into it after I graduated. So my family was moved to Nashville, and out of college, I did some work in Nashville for about a year or two, and I got into knives then. I joined some forums then. The first forum I joined was Jersey Devil Forum, and that was probably around 2006 or so. And I joined the USN at the same time on some account that I don't even have access to anymore. But I remember that you had to pay for a Cove membership, and I thought that was bullshit, right? And my theory at that time was that why would I pay for anything? I'll just buy stuff off eBay, right? So back in 2006, I joined the Jersey Devil, and I joined Blade forums, of course, and so I was looking at stuff and then looking at like the cool dealers at the time, but it was tough because, I had some experience, but I had a job. I was writing. I've always been a writer. I wrote in high school. I wrote throughout college, and I got hired as a writer out of college. And so, I had a little bit of money to spend and wanted to buy some cool stuff. And so I was going on Blade forums and doing the typical stuff that people did back in the mid 2000s, was like best tactical frame lock, right? And like reading like that was how I cut my teeth on like the idea of like the custom knife world, was reading comparisons between Sebenzas and Strider SNGs. And like, man, I would sit in my room and drink beers and smoke cigarettes and just like for days read through threads, trying to like process all the knowledge. Like I've always been an obsessive type of individual, but like I just obsessed over understanding like all of like the background, the drama behind situations, like the stuff that, people didn't want to talk about. I wanted to read about all that shit. Like I just found the whole custom knife world infinitely fascinating. And, so I think while I was in Nashville, I bought my first Chris Reeve Sebenza, probably at that time was a 21 or a classic, right? And then I bought off eBay, I bought one of the old school Sebenzas in BG42, which was, I should have saved that one because now it's worth some money. And then I bought a Strider SNG. I brought a brown G10 Tonto Strider SNG. I remember that very distinctly. Right. And I remember like that thing, like that was one of the first times where I I remember breaking in a knife for the first time, right? Like sitting there in my room, just like opening and closing this thing 1,000 times, and my thumb just getting beat the hell up. And like Googling, is your thumb supposed to hurt? Opening up a knife, all that stuff. Like I learned it. I didn't really have it. I just like learned. I made a lot of mistakes. I learned just by buying shit and seeing if I liked it. And back then, I mean, I didn't really like trust forums or trust. There certainly there wasn't. There was Facebook, but Facebook didn't have a marketplace, right? There was no Instagram at that time. So I just kept the stuff like that I had in a box, right? And then I moved to Manhattan, right? So I got a job working for a news corporation, writing documentaries for Fox News.
Nice.
So I moved to Manhattan. And of course, Manhattan, even back then, we had like the stop and frisk laws. So it was a little bit tougher to, I kept my knives, but I wasn't, actively buying stuff. But there was a very fortuitous thing that occurred to me in Manhattan. I read about this place, and this was in 2008 to 2009, maybe 2010. I was about a year and a half. And a place called Three Little Indians Custom Knives, right?
Yeah. I remember.
So Larry, right? Yeah. Larry was my dude. I miss Larry very much. Larry passed, what is it, 4 years ago now? Maybe 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So Three Little Indians Custom Knives. I want to set the setting for you guys because it was, I want to say it was in Chinatown, right? It was like you had to go in. It was like above like an Italian restaurant that I think Larry had a share in, and you had to like buzz this thing in, and somebody asked like, "Who are you? Why are you here?" Right? And you go up, and it was like it was a cigar bar. That was the thing. Three Little Indians was the cigar bar, right? The Three Little Indians Custom Knives was the side attached little glass area where you'd go in and see all these knives that I couldn't have even imagined, in my wildest dreams ever handling, right? I touched Kirby Lambert's for the first time. I touched, I think RJ Martin's for the first time. All this stuff in like real tactical folders. The first time I ever handled Emerson production knives. It was, all these cool things were suddenly made available to me. And this guy, Larry, who was just so fucking cool and just had me there. We hung out, we talked. He didn't push me to buy anything. And that was at the same time he showed me, right, the first Rick Hinderers, right, the XM18. XM18 came out like 2006 or so. I don't really know, but it was 2008, right? This was right when the XM18 was gaining a lot of popularity. And so, all right, why am I saying this, right? Well, that was what stoked the love of custom folders, right? And like, at that time I thought, a Hinder XM18 was a custom folder. It was just Rick and Rob Orlando with one CNC making shit in a barn in Shreve, Ohio, or wherever, Ohio, right? So that was just so cool for me. And it was also in 2008 or so, I got, I think I joined the USN, and I moved to, I left Fox News. That was probably, Fox News was probably at the end of 2009 and 2010. And I moved to Ohio. I moved to Ohio to get my master's degree and to teach. I got my master's degree in literary theory and linguistics, and taught at Kent State University. So at Kent State, really enjoying sort of the whole EDC world, right? I got my first Tad gear bag, right? Oh, that was a big deal, right?
Ooh,
right. Holy shit. Like there's this cool company that's like, remember that back in the day, it was like Tad gear was like a company that was making gear and like shit for us, like dudes that liked weird, obsessive stuff, and again, I'm not into like the custom, the gun world. So I was into like backpacks and like the cool technical shorts, all that really lame stuff that makes us geeky fanboys. And so again, I'm in Ohio. I'm studying, I'm teaching, but I have a lot of free time. I'm getting more involved on forums, and that was the first time that I started buying and selling knives, right? Instead of just having a big box of knives, I realized, wow, these forums aren't that shady. I can actually like list stuff for sale and like buy and sell stuff and like wow, I can like make a little money doing this, and like have more money for knives, and like, you know,
shame on you.
I know, right, right, yeah. So doing that, yeah. Go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Justin, but like I know for some of us, certainly for me, and I think we've talked about it in some of the episodes with the other guys as well. It sounds like you just kind of like slow rolled is not the right way to put it, but just kind of made your way right on straight through from production knives and started to get into customs or high end production knives. Like for me, it was a huge deal the first time I bought a Sebenza. Like it was you know what I mean? Like, oh my God, I'm going to hold my breath and I'm going to spend $300 on a knife. $300 is stupid money for a knife. Did you go through that?
Still, by the way, it still is stupid money for a knife. Like,
yes, yeah.
Whenever anybody sells like, oh my God, I can't believe somebody spent $5,000 on a knife. Listen, 99% of the population thinks we're completely stupid for spending more than $50 on a knife. The difference between 300 and 5,000 is really insignificant when most of the world thinks that we're stupid for spending more than $50. Right. Like that's just the truth of it. So yeah, that was huge for me getting my first Sebenza, the first Strider. Right. And back then, how do I just say this? I wasn't concerned with the idea of custom in that regard. And maybe the same way
what custom means.
Yeah. And again, this was at the time when Ken Onion was like first like dropping the idea of like what a mid tech was. Right. This was at the time when we were really, you know, parsing the idea of a taxonomy and sort of a classification system of what constitutes what that the community is still obsessed with, I think, to its detriment. So
agree much.
So yeah, I mean, I wasn't really, I didn't know what a custom. I mean, I knew that there was some stuff out there. Like I saw a Michael Birch for the first time, right? I saw that, and I saw like, wow, he's using like high carbon steel in a folder, right? And like that seems silly and stupid to me until I saw one at my first get together, right? And all of a sudden I became obsessed, absolutely obsessed with, you know, like, oh my God, Hamones, and you know, there's all this artwork and cool, you know, like, you know, an element of this other side of the coin of the custom knife world, which is forging and blacksmith work, all that stuff that plays into the other, you know, half of probably that, you know, that I don't engage with nearly enough.
Right. So your transition into the more actual custom stuff, aside from the exposure you got in Manhattan at Three Little Indians.
Yeah, it was Ohio.
Was really in Ohio. Yeah.
Yeah, because again, so I went on the USN, right? I went on the USN and I saw somebody posted that there was an Ohio get together at Rick Hinderer's shop, right? And so I was like, well, that's probably in Cincinnati or something like that. And I looked up where his place was, and it was 40 minutes from me in Kent, Ohio, right? And Kent is just south of Cleveland. And I was like, listen, I'm not a very confident person, and I've got issues with social anxiety and shit like that. And so the idea of me driving to meet a bunch of strangers to talk about knives was just like, yeah, it was a leap of faith that I couldn't fucking believe I took. Right. But I did it. Right. I did it. I showed up there and I met like Eric Mack. I met Tattoo. What is Tattoo? You know, I can't remember his I just
Scott Martin.
Scott. I remember the forum names, right? And he, you know, they showed me, Kendrick Fixed Blades, right? And then, oh my God, right? I handled a Scott Cook Loksha for the first time, right?
Yeah.
And that was the thing when I saw an Integral folder. And again, you have to understand me and what my aesthetic. If anybody knows the knives I collect, I'm not a fancy dude. I like, I don't like Damascus. I don't like a lot of materials on knives. I like micarta. I like titanium. I like steel. I like to see the finish on steel. I'm a pretty, I've got pretty down to earth tastes when it comes to stuff. That's not to say I don't appreciate it. It's just in a weird, like sort of Woody Allen way. I feel like I don't deserve fancy knives. You know, it's like, that's meant for a class, a caliber of person that's above what I am.
Say you enjoy elegant simplicity.
Yeah, that's true. That's a great,
that polishes it up nice.
Yeah,
it's worth noting that amongst our common group of friends, there is a certain combination of knife finishes that is known as the full Laffer.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So like blasted, tumbled, everything.
Yeah, well, and I used to, but see, the thing is that I used to love stonewash finish on custom knives, because a stonewash finish on a custom knife pre-2012 was kind of like a rare thing, right? This was like before mid-techs were coming out, right? So to like get a custom knife from a dude with like a stonewash finish, and like, you gotta remember, like the stonewash finish that I used to like was like Neil Blackwood's stonewash finish, right? And Neil Blackwood's stonewash finish was just, it was so fucking rich and decadent, and like it had layers, and like I think he called it like a river wash finish. And like, you know, people throw around the idea of like trash can finishes, but like Neil's like looked like a beat up trash can from like the 1980s, or like pre-Giuliani New York, right? It was like this thrashed badass. It had flecks and specks of color and light. Like that was the stonewash finish that I like. And then, you know, the mid-tech evolution occurred, and stonewash became this much more prevalent thing on knives. And so my taste is now sort of, I love satin finish on knives. Now I like to see, you know, belt grinds. I like to see, you know, a little bit of the finish. You know, I'm not up into like the mirror polish, but I love a hand rub. You know, I love what, like, you know, Jerry McGinnis does with a hand rub, like that stuff. It does well for me. I got a Birch Genesis with a really cool hand rub that I love. And yeah, so
that just sounds wrong.
Yeah. So yeah, to get back to it, Ohio was when I started handling stuff, and that's when I went like fucking nuts, right? Like that's when I just started buying, flipping, getting stuff in. I made every mistake. I made lots of money. I lost lots of money. I gave money to people I shouldn't have given money to, right? Like I cut my teeth in all the right way, all the wrong way, and spent couple years doing so. And all those people in Ohio that I met, you know, like those are the dudes that gave me a lot of good guidance. You know, Larry would call me up at all times to, you know, that was back in the day when, you know, a Hinder XM18, you know, table price on that was $300, and you buy that for $300, and, you know, you had people immediately that would offer you $1,000 for it. Right. Like that was that was the flip on that. And, so I would be going to these get-togethers, and, you know, there would be 10 of us that would show up, and Rick would bring out, you know, a platter, if you will, a buffet, hot buffet platter of 30 knives, right? For 10 of us. Right. And he's like, yeah, just whatever you guys want. You know, there's some customs on there. There are most productions. And, you know, if you guys want them, you know, buy them. And, you know, so people were there, you know, driving from like Oklahoma. I remember a guy showed up to one of the get-togethers there from Oklahoma to buy like 6 of them, you know, and he kept 1 or 2 and would sell the rest. And this was, you know, he had 1 CNC at the time. There was such this pent up demand for these, you know, really well made tactical folders that had, you know, again, there was like a cool narrative behind it, right? Like, oh, he was a fireman. It was built for people in extreme situations. So we attached the sense of possibility, and sort of like, ooh, you know, if I bought this, if I was ever in it, you know, we tell these bullshit stories to ourselves about why we need to justify buying things that we don't need to own, right? Like, well, if I was ever in a fucking weird situation, right, I totally need you know, an RMJ Forge axe in my trunk and a Rick Hinder XM18 on my belt, and I'd get out of anything, you know, with that combination. And, you know, we tell this stuff to justify the money that we want to spend on luxury goods.
Well, it's part of the dream, again, like we talked about earlier. But I've got a question for you. This came up in my Facebook group.
I just think I know what you're going to ask because I saw it.
Why do you think flipping has such a bad connotation now? You know, would you like to expound on that a little?
Sure. I mean, I can expound on it, and I probably have a pretty unpopular opinion. People want knives, right? And people want stuff that they could buy and use. And that's the story that we hear, right? Like, well, people flipping it, well, that people that, you know, want to use these knives don't get it. If a person really wants to use a knife, they should buy a Spyderco. Like, if a person really wants to buy a knife, like, buy a Swiss Army knife. At least, listen, I'm a, you know, almost a professional grad student. The only thing that I could ever really need a knife for is like a serrated steak knife and a Swiss Army knife is all the possible use scenarios I could see from myself. But, you know, the idea that, well, you're keeping them from the hands of people that really want them. Yeah, there's an element of truth to that. I think the other element is that they really wish that they were the ones that were buying it and flipping it, you know?
Right.
They would love to be the one who has the opportunity to purchase that and to sell it for a profit. Now listen, that we're talking about the nutty, fun heyday of 2008 to 2015 knife world, right? Which was crazy. We were operating in a zero risk environment, right?
Right.
You could buy any bullshit, crummy titanium frame lock folder that was on the market for $600. You could buy it, use it, put it in your pocket, get some scratches on it, decide you didn't like it, and immediately list it and get your money back for $600. Right. That's insane, right? No commodity market, no luxury good market is like that. We were in this strange, nitrous induced weird environment where it was zero risk and all this speculation and strange buying habits. And I was going to the market, buying a lot of knives and really accelerating very fast, and immediately started selling knives to Russia, to China. I got in pretty deep, pretty fast in the sort of the high end flipping market, and some of the dudes that make fun of me say like I was knife speculating, right? But I mean, yeah, it was like knife venture capitalism, right? Like trying to find new makers, because that was back when there was this idea of books, right? Can you get on someone's books? Which was, could you get a relationship with a maker early enough to establish a relationship so that you could get the possibility of owning a knife or two, and there was your chance to have something that everybody wanted and the possibility of profitability in that relationship, right? So there was this weird, circle jerk, relationship that was occurring with makers and collectors where, you're trying to establish, hey, the idea of, hey, bro, right? Hey, bro was what comes from those heady, cash fueled days of that time when you're really trying to get on books and try to, get your chance to own something. If you didn't like it, well, hey, you're going to make $1,000 for not liking something.
Right.
Did you see my response to that question in my group?
And you're completely right. Like these dudes that think that the pent up demand that comes from makers, it doesn't come from the fact that their knives are really good. That's part of it. That is part of it. But the pent up demand from makers comes from a secondary market. I mean, a secondary market is certainly, it is a motivating factor. I mean, you look at the difference between a Rolex and an Omega, right? They're both cool things. They both really operate well. But the pent-up demand for Rolex is because there's a secondary market for steel sports model watches, right? That is the essence of it.
So often my customers are like, I'm not all about the max profit thing, but a strong secondary market is one of the best things a maker can have.
Absolutely.
It's like, and we've seen it. I mean, we've seen it. If you try to chase that secondary market, that's the worst thing you can do.
The worst thing that you can possibly do. And listen, I want makers to get as much money as possible, right? Like I think that, I look at Scott Cook and what he does, right? He makes one knife model, right? He makes the same knife that's been unchanged since 2007. I finally got my order from placing it there in 2008 or 2009. I got it a year and a half ago, wow. 2 years ago. It's unchanged from the knife that I originally handled. I think it was Eric Mack's knife in Ohio, right? 10 years on, the knife is just a really cool, simple integral frame lock. But what he does is he sells those. I mean, his price has increased from $700 to $900 in that time frame of 10 years. He sells knives, makes them very slowly, and once a month he puts a knife up for open bid. And that's what sustains it, right? He knows how to, in the same way that Ernest Emerson knows how to ride the wave of demand of continued, to understand the market for what it is and not what you want it to be.
Yeah.
But you always got folks that point at it like it's such a horrible thing. Yes, there's people that take it to the extreme and will use a maker or use customers to get the most out of them. But for the most part, most people are just buying and selling stuff they want to use or enjoy or make money off. And there's nothing wrong with that. As long as you're not hurting somebody else in the process, it shouldn't matter. And it shouldn't matter to other people what someone else is doing either.
it shouldn't, right? It shouldn't. But whatever the hell reason, we are obsessed. We are obsessed with what other people do with their money. And I mean, it's part of me thinks it's this sense of, we think that the market should be a certain way because we value certain things in knives, and I completely understand that. There's certain things in knives that I really value. I cannot stand knives with exposed detent tracks, right? That's a personal preference of me, right?
I am with you on that one, Justin.
I cannot fucking stand knives with exposed detent tracks. And I watch knives with exposed detent tracks go for $5,000, $7,000, $10,000 on open bids, right? And a part of me thinks, well, shit, something's wrong with the universe. Something is wrong because my sense of aesthetics and in basic design is being violated, and something should be done to correct the market, right? But the market is the market. The way I adjust the market is because I don't bid. I put money. I mean, money talks in this marketplace, right? So if I want to influence something in that regard, I put my money where my mouth is, and I buy stuff that I think is cool. And that sticks around with the principles that I think are, and what the fuck are my principles, right? Like, I don't have this figured out. I don't have this, I'm sure, does an exposed detent track make a knife really less usable? Probably not. No, I mean, there's people that say probably, oh, well, you can blow out, oil from the detent track easier or clean it by hand. Sure, maybe that's the case, right? I just think that it looks ugly, and I think that it's a fugly thing that people missed on a design, and but I like all sorts of shitty stuff, right? I like prime rib, and I like McDonald's hamburgers, right? Like, I'm not,
Which one of those is bad?
I don't. It's just different. There's just different asses for different seats, right?
But it's almost like there used to be these like kind of set rules of aesthetics, and it seems like they've gotten looser and looser as we've gone on through the years of our little modern age of custom knife stuff. And it's like if a few guys did it and did it well, it's like, okay, it's almost like it allowed other makers to do something. Like a few guys did the exposed detent, and it looked okay when they did it. So that was like it opened the gates for that to happen, and with other design aspects. So it's kind of interesting to watch how some of these designs kind of flow and change.
All right. So with all that said, are there any other design aspects that are off-putting to you?
Yeah. I mean, there are, right? But I try not to live by there's like some game. Yeah, there's some stuff for me that I just consider unacceptable, right? Weak detents are the thing that I hate, the most. I can't stand the idea of a knife opening in my pocket without me, opening it. There are certain things that I don't like, but that I allow myself to contradict myself in a lot of stuff because I found that anything that I set myself on as fixed is like, oh, I don't like that. That violates a certain principle that I have. I've been so wonderfully surprised, right, in my life about things that I didn't think I would like, and then go to Blade Show, go to the Gathering, go to the Kentucky Custom Knife Show that I just got back from, right? And I go and I see something, and and it fucking opens my eyes, and I realize, wow, the more I'm in this community, the more I realize how little I know and how little I know about myself. And the more I open myself up to cool experiences and cool new stuff, the more pleasantly surprised I am. But yeah, is there stuff that I generally don't like? Yeah, I don't like trendy new materials. Like, I hated it when C-Tech and the Macecraft stuff came out. I really don't like carbo quartz now. I don't want to own a knife with carbo quartz. I don't, but again, maybe there's something that would change my mind. Maybe there is something that would be really cool. The big overbuilt tactical folder market was a thing for a while, right? And I had like Dalibors, and I had Ramon Chavez stuff, and I had, knives that I don't even want to mention that were super thick and like overbuilt for the sake of being overbuilt. And that was a trend that I was, a total fanboy of, and I thought about that. And, I very much separated. I don't collect overbuilt knives anymore, but, I still love like Ramon stuff, but he's gone away from sort of the big 1/4-inch thick stock knives into more sort of, graceful, purposeful, utilitarian. The pendulum has swung away from that overbuilt, market, which used to be really, really popular a couple of years back. And it's now swung back to, purposeful, graceful, intelligent, thoughtful designs, I think, are really what drives the market now. You know, like when you look at a knife and you see the aesthetic principles involved in it, and the thing that really is a differentiating factor for me, and if I want to buy a knife or not, is if I look at a knife and I don't know the model per se, right? If I looked at something from Sean Kendrick or Tom Crine, and I didn't know the model, but I can look at it and I can easily identify that it's from that maker, right? There is a design language involved that is emblematic to that maker, and I can tell that just off the cuff, right? That really lights a fire under my ass. And of course, I think that's very true with Michael Birch's work, right? When I see a Birch, to see a Birch design is to know Michael's influences and to see sort of the proto-Chinese stuff, the original Dao stuff, and to see how that evolved with the raised thumb ramps and the thumb dips and all those cool Birchian stuff that I just fucking love. Like seeing Michael's design flow and process and evolve, but always maintaining that sense. I mean, Michael, I don't want to jerk you off more than I have to, but that you have always had
keep going, buddy.
You've always had this incredible sense of proportion and a design ethic, if you will, that flows throughout all of your work. Which is, I can see one of your new models. I don't have to know that what model is, but I know that you made it, right? Just based upon the lines, the flow, the design language involved, and that for me. That's what gets me motivated to collect something, to say like, yeah, this is representative of the maker, which I think gets into like what I collect, which is stuff that represents people that I enjoy. Like stuff that symbolizes people that I've had good interactions with, whose business ethics, whose design work, whose the way they treat the customers is something that I see, something that I appreciate, and something that I want to be a part of. So is there anything that really drives me off? Exposed detents is probably the one thing where I just can't. That's like a deal breaker for me. But yeah.
Well, holy shit! First off, thank you very much. That is probably one of the biggest compliments I've had in a long time, and I appreciate that.
Oh, you're welcome.
I wanted to go back to,
and that's not to say that a lot of people haven't tried to take that design language from you, by the way.
It is,
and try to co-opt that language into their own, but co-opt, yeah.
It's a lot harder to keep a hold of that. That's for sure. But you mentioned something earlier about how you've been surprised. What's a knife or something you've seen lately that's really surprised you in a good way, as far as something that you didn't think you'd like that you actually liked or ended up enjoying?
Question.
That is a good question. Like there's certain materials that I don't enjoy because. Like, okay, so there's a couple stuff that I just think, like copper is one of them, where copper looks cool and I love the way it patinas, right? But it's heavy as shit, and I like to carry my stuff because I like to play with knives. I like to keep them around, and copper being so heavy and so smelly, right? Like when you have a copper, and I'm a sweaty ass dude, right? I'm an unfortunate looking sweaty guy, and when I carry that around, it's like it smells like I'm carrying a stack of pennies in my pocket, right? So like,
right.
But there's some cool copper stuff that I've handled. But the other one, I always thought zirconium was kind of like, sort of trendy fanboy stuff because people wanted it because it got dark, right? It got black, right? So I was like, I'll never have a zirconium knife, right? 2 years ago, I win a knife from the Kentucky Custom Knife Show from Sean Kendrick. I love it, right? My Smoke Banshee. Carry it all the time. It is my jam. I fucking love this thing. And then one day, somebody tells me, well, do you like all the zirconium accents? And I'm like, well, my knife doesn't have zirconium accents. I wouldn't own a knife with zirconium on it, right? And Sean's like, no, brother, man, your knife has got zirconium thumb studs. It's zirconium. I'm doing a Sean Kendrick impression, by the way.
Whoa, I thought that was Sean talking. Holy shit!
Damn.
Yeah, you should hear my Christopher. You should hear my Christopher Walken. This knife, it's got zirconium on it. It's surprising to me. So that was like that off the top of my head, like a knife that surprised me. And then, I thought that that dudes that carried around hanks and slip joints were kind of, you know, we call it like fuckboyetry, right? Like they're like the hipsters of the knife world, right? With their hanks and like, you know, their slip joints and taking pictures of their leather shoes and all this shit that I thought was kind of like, I mean, I'm the most pretentious person I fucking know. And I just thought that was just like the most pretentious bullshit. But listen, I went and I handled some cool slip joints and I like them. And now I've got this like Pepe Jalomo that I got with like micarta, and like, you know, I still like that it has the modern construction. It's got screw construction. He like learned under Enrique Pena. So it's got, you know, green canvas micarta, which is like my favorite material. I love micarta, right? I love the fact that micarta goes back to like World War I, World War II, and that it's got like a purpose to it. It gets grippy when you're sweaty. It has color. It has texture. It's not sort of like the modern G10, but it has all this like nuance and historicity involved in it. And man, micarta for me is just the stuff that I really enjoy. Micarta, titanium. What was the question again? I sort of lost myself.
I don't know, but I think you made up a word there. I don't know.
Historicity? No,
yeah.
That's a word. What? That's a word.
Come on,
fucking Google it, bro.
Damn it. Should have known better.
I think we were on something that surprised you in a good way kind of thing.
It's just stuff that surprised me in a good way. I mean, like I never thought I would like chisel grind knives, right? Like chisel grind for me, you know, getting into it was just like, oh, that was so taboo because, right? I cut my teeth on the Blade Forums days, right? I cut my teeth with Cliff Stamp's knife reviews, right? You guys remember Cliff Stamp? Oh, you guys think that the current trend of professionalized reviewers were bad. Go back to the heady days of 2010 with Cliff's fucking forum. That was some gnarly stuff. But you know,
I actually like Cliff Stamp.
No, I do too. And now that I see like the reviewers that are out there,
he's a smart guy.
Yeah, I don't remember what all the drama was. I just remember that like
he destroyed stuff.
Yeah, and I was Team USN, and like there was like people who were like against him on the forum, and so immediately I just said, "Oh yeah, screw him. He's bad, right?" And like, you know, again, the things I've been pleasantly surprised with, like people that I was told were bad, and then people I was told were good. That, you know, like I've been I've been continuing. There's been one common thread throughout my time in the custom knife world. It's been my consistency in being wrong.
Well, and I think it's there's a couple interesting things that you talked about, but that we didn't really get into. And you know, one is not everyone has taken the long way around the barn.
Yeah.
And in reality, that's what you did, right?
I did.
I mean, it's a very exploratory, you were on a very exploratory path with knives for a long time. And I mean, I think that's where the whole knife prospecting thing, you know, that people would rib you for, that's where that all came from, because you were out, like you said, trying to find new makers.
I was trying to find new shit and like looking up like little forums and looking up like, you know, this was back when knife makers used to have a website and host their photos somewhere, right? Like that was how you found out about a knife maker, was to like Google them and find their webpage and find where they hosted. You know, knife makers weren't on social media. They you know, and there was a select few that were on forums, but a lot of them you just had to find by word of mouth, or like the original reviewers. And like the original reviewers were like, you know, dudes on Blade Forums, dudes on the USN, and let's see if who else remembers this guy, Custom Tacticals. Do you guys remember Custom Tacticals, who like had hosted one of the first knife YouTube, like custom knife YouTube channels? And he talked to you through like this, and he still does reviews every once in a while. Like he like talked through scuba gear, like in this shitty like Nokia recordings of knives. But he was the one that like originally like I would see like, oh, cool XM18s, cool SNGs, cool SMFs, and like, you know, that type of stuff. So yeah, I was able to go to knife shows, knife get-togethers pretty early, and then my parents lived in Nashville. I lived in Ohio. 2008 or so, I heard about this thing called Blade Show. So I went to my first Blade Show in 2018. And actually last year was the first Blade Show I've missed. I took a break from going to it to sort of like reevaluate my like of the industry, my like of the community. And I took a break. I was sort of sad I did, because I kind of wish I had gone. But I think I sort of needed it to have like a reset, you know, saying like, shit, like stuff has gotten intense in my life. And, I wanted to like, say, hey, do I really like custom knives like I used to, or do I just need a pastime? Right. Like,
right.
Because custom knives has been a wonderful pastime for me. I think that a lot of adult males need to have something they collect and something they're passionate about in this modern world. We need to have something that lights a fire under our ass to get us to work harder, to motivate us to do stuff. I have a wonderful wife, but I don't have any kids right now. I have a lovely dog. I have a house. I have a job I like. But collecting knives is a lovely pastime. It occupies my time. It is something that I find interesting. I like the characters involved. I know the characters. I know the people. Every single member of Mark of the Maker is somebody who's a knife I've gotten from directly, right? Like these are all people that I know, that I've talked to, that I've bullshitted with. And I enjoy the environment. I enjoy the repartee between people and the inside jokes and the group chats and the grabassery and the dislikes. I enjoy having people that don't like me. It's all sort of a fun, entertaining industry to be involved with.
Well, and I think the longer you're in the game, the more it becomes about that as well as the knives, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And if I give advice, like I had a buddy from college who was in my fraternity with me, who just started collecting. He's collecting very hard and very strong and very fast with a lot of money involved. And I try to tell him to slow down, right? The thing that you cannot replace is slowness. So I think the question was like, you can't replicate time. And time and the long attribution of memories and of experiences. And I've got knives that I got at first that I thought were meh, okay, it's interesting. I kind of like the guy who made it, but whatever. And a year passes, 2 years pass, 3 years pass. The longest knife that's in my collection was a birch tree bamboo that I got in 2009, right? So I've had that knife since 2009. And it's cool, right? Like I enjoy the fact that it's 1095 and just completely patinaed to shit, right? It's unsaleable for me, right? Because it's one, I don't think I could sell it because it's so messed up. And Michael, you don't deserve. You don't deserve. Oh, it's bad. It's bad. It's real bad. And I wouldn't want Michael to have to do the spa treatment on it.
Is that the one you stabbed a can with or something?
Yeah, back in my drinking days, I decided that it would be really cool to go on Instagram and stab a can of beans or something like that. I was making chili and I opened up sour cream.
Jeez.
I opened up a can of beans with it and I opened up chili with it, and I would use it like as a steak knife because I wanted to see like how badly you could use 1095, right? And like just get it completely, and it's like just like smoky black now, right? Like it doesn't really even have a hamon anymore. It's just like blackened steel.
I always wondered how you lost that finger.
I think the things are very different today than they were. I mean, I got to say, when I think about those numbers, right? Oh, in 2009, I've had something since 2009. I say the same thing. And I feel like a douche for saying it because it's not that long ago.
No, it's not that long ago.
It really is, but it isn't at the same time, right? It's 9 years ago. It's 9 years. But
in knife world, but it seems like time has been going faster, right? Like 2009 to 2011 seems like nothing, right? There was not a lot of, maybe there was a lot of change, but it doesn't seem like a lot. But like 2016 to 2018 was like, holy shit, like
super
world
explosion.
Like things have changed, and social media is no, listen, it is the world, right? Social media doesn't change people. It exposes people. Social media reveals what people really are and their wants and needs and desires. And social media accelerates things. Like the whole idea of forums and old school, chat rooms and stuff like that. It's the same thing. Forums and chats, it is social media. It was proto-social media. And it just happened slowly. Yeah. And it happened gradually and in glacial pace. And now we're just at a time when everything is happening all the time. And a lot of it's documented.
But I can't keep up. I can't keep up with all the makers anymore. It's impossible. You'll go on Instagram and I'll see someone who has a hell of a lot of followers I've never heard of in my life. And a lot of like this boom of kitchen knives and forging has just shot up and gone crazy.
So I have this idea about it because we have this idea of like the good old days of like, back in 1988, right? The makers were just all so good, right? That's the makers we know about because they were left a record of them. There was just as many bullshit makers back then as there were now. Right?
I don't think there was. I don't think there was as many makers, period.
Well, yeah, certainly there weren't as many makers, period. What I'm trying to say is I think, well, one, maybe it weeded people out, but we just don't know about the shitty ones, right? We don't know about the shitters because they weren't left in books.
There's still guys that were sticking
they had no way to sell
rasps and, antlers and stuff. I agree with that,
But they had no way to sell. So, there wasn't any reason.
They didn't have a way to sell. They didn't have a way to market. They didn't have a way to advertise. And today, anybody with a smartphone, right, can develop a presence. And I mean, not that you couldn't before if you really tried, but today I think it's much
a lot easier. And there's a formula for it. If you have the right, Instagram type photo and you do the right hashtags, you're going to do well. There's pretty much a formula you can follow and do well with knife making these days.
So when I think about the earlier comments that Justin made, so when we talked briefly about flipping, right? Like buying knives and turning around and selling them. There's really even then there were 3 aspects to it. There's probably more, but there's kind of like 3, right? One, there's a profit motive, right? Like, okay, there's an honest financial motive sometimes, right? If you play it right, where you could actually make some money. And like you said, support your hobby or pay for a trip to a show or whatever. So there's this financial motive. There's the motherfuckery motive of, hey, I want to have this cool thing,
right?
And I want to post it in the custom section at USN, and I want to be the first guy to have this cool thing, right? And there's there were people that were trying to be on the bleeding edge of stuff because there's a
social capital that's involved with it, right? A cultural capital that comes with having that cool new shit. And I'm certainly guilty. I'm guilty of all of these motives, right? I've done every.
It's the modern showmanship.
Yeah. And you notice that one of the motivations that we didn't mention in that was because people don't want to get a $7,000 Rexford because it cuts better, right? Like the whole use your shit mentality of like, well, wow, that guy got it. I should have gotten it. You're not wanting to get it because that will be the functional tool that will finally allow you to cut that last Gorgon's knot, right? Like we want it for all these reasons. And we look down on these reasons as if they're modern reasons. No one needs a wristwatch anymore, but we like this stuff because it's cool, because it's symbolic, because it's little talismans and trinkets of the modern male that, allow us to sort of like symbolize what we value, what's important to us, the little totems of who we like and who we don't like, what symbolically we want to say. Everything is a symbolic representation of what we're trying to say, right? What we're trying to say about ourselves. In the same way that clothing says something about ourselves. So these little tools, these little trinkets, these little toys, all are a way of us expressing through language who we are.
Right.
I think that's why the EDC market has exploded.
Yeah.
Because it gives a language to that type of desire to express that.
Well,
yeah.
Well, and the whole idea that a lot of the stuff, not all of it, but a lot of the stuff in the quote unquote EDC world are things that are for various reasons cheaper than knives, right? Or more accessible or more available or whatever. And I think that appeals to people because
absolutely. Listen, it's
attainable.
It's a cool hobby because it's attainable. Like I love watches, right? I love watches and I want to have more watches. I can't fuck around with the watch world as much as I can the knife world because there's a higher barrier to entry and greater risk involved.
Exactly.
And that's what makes knives are generally attainable. Now, this is sort of like, pretentious to me to say, is the starting price of a custom knife is about a custom folder, right? Is about $500 and goes up from there. But in the context of the modern world, that is relatively accessible.
But like you were saying, Justin, you're saying how fast social media moves. And one of the aspects that we all are bad about is worrying about likes. And, you buy one expensive thing. Shit, if that thing runs out of likes, I think this happens to a lot of people. They want to move on to the next thing because it's not getting the attention that it originally got. And these smaller EDC items you can buy and be like, okay, I'm getting people's attention. It's the modern man's peacock feathers, and you're able to move faster and still
maybe I've avoided. I may have I don't know. I'm unique in this world. I said that I don't collect guns or anything like that. But I've also been Justin Laffer on every forum and everything since the beginning, right? I was Laffer JC for a few years, and then I moved to Justin Laffer. So I've sort of integrated my personal life with my hobby pretty early on. So it's interesting for me because, you know, what I put on my Instagram is pictures of my wife, pictures of my dog, pictures of cool knives, pictures of watches, pictures of me traveling. I don't just have an EDC account, right? What you see is just me. It's just, I mean, yeah, it's, of course I filter things through the context of what I want to show. That would be bullshit and of me to say that I don't filter things, but it's generally me, right? So when I when I post, you know, that I'm listening to Lil Peep or something like that, and some music that people really don't like, but I really get off on, and I see that I get 30 likes, right? Something I've got, I don't know how many followers, 7,000 or something like that. And that still fucking amazes me that 7,000 people, you know, probably half of them are bots, but that 7,000 people have any desire to see what the fuck is going on in my life, it amazes me. But the fact that I don't differentiate, sort of, I don't know, it eliminated some of that desire for more likes from me, because if they don't like it, well, you know, I don't think that people don't like my wife. Maybe some people don't like my wife, but I just generally think that there's certain audiences for saying, like, I got people from college that follow me and like, what's the deal with the knife shit? And I'm like, yeah, it's my hobby, right? It's my hobby. And if you don't like it, I'm sorry, but that's sort of like my life. And if you don't like it, I'm not forcing you to follow me, you know? So that's what you're going to see when you get me. So I just sort of accept it as like, some people, I've got more knife people on my account that like knife stuff. I got some watch people like watch stuff. And I got some people that just want to, like, you know, probably some of my exes that just want to stalk me and, you know, see how much weight I've gained or how much weight I've lost. You know, it's, you know, the usual stuff.
I've got the same sort of thing going where it's like, where I've got people that I grew up with that are into the knife stuff now, because it's all the same thing, same account, same me all over the place. But then you have everyone from different aspects seeing it. And sometimes you're like, oh shit, you know, it gets kind of weird and murky, you know, when people see some of that stuff.
Yeah. Life is kind of weird and murky, right? Like it's,
well,
you know, it's like,
ain't that the truth?
It's like the contradictions and stuff. And, you know, yeah, I get you.
So kind of where I was going before, three things: financial motivation at some level, motherfuckery motivation, right? Stunt or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And then the other piece is
like the tastemaker aspect. Like, do people want to be on the bleeding edge to say like, oh, I'm on the cutting edge of, actually, I knew about him before, you know, like the indie band scene type of situation.
To me, I roll that into the social equity piece of it. You know, because everybody has their own version of it, right? Mm-hmm. Somebody wants to be the hard use guy, and somebody wants to be the bleeding edge guy, and somebody wants to be the tasteful collector guy, and somebody wants to be the, you know, monster heavy use knife guy. But to me, those are all the same kind of thing. And but the third piece is things are a little bit different today. At the risk of doing grouchy old man stuff, they're a little bit different today because earlier on, some time ago, and I mean, we've talked about this a little bit with when we had Kevin on. If you saw a picture of a knife, the only way to be able to have any level of exposure to it is you had to buy one, right? So, I mean, I went through a shitload of knives. I
know I used to send you knives back in the day. Do you remember? Or you used to send me knives
we
too.
did some trade stuff. That was just to check out
when Desmo was new on the forums, and I saw this cool guy, and I was like, yeah, let's trade some stuff.
I think you went through a lot more stuff than I did. I think for sure. But as part of this whole exploration thing that you were doing.
Yeah, but you've always been a better collector than me. You've always had a sense, like when I look at your collection, like you have purpose and direction, right? And I used to collect certain makers that I don't collect anymore. I used to have tons of certain makers that I don't collect anymore,
right?
For various reasons. But like you've always seemed to have, like, you know, your cool Westinghouse. You have a certain design principle that you attach yourself to. And my plain Jane stuff, and I've flipped more than you. You seem to have principles which I lack.
Well, I think that there's a part of that exploration thing that can only happen through buying stuff and owning it for a while. Mm-hmm. And or at least carrying it in your pocket for a little while, at least for me, right? Because I mean, there are knives that people love that have massive followings made by makers that people adore, that when I got one and put it in my pocket, it didn't do anything for me. Yeah. I mean, okay, it might have been the coolest thing that week, on USN or whatever, but it didn't really do anything for me. So I'm out. Right. Mm-hmm. So, and some of that just comes with, and I had the same experience when I was real heavy into guitar stuff, because there would be this crazy special custom kind of gear, guitars or amps or whatever. Nobody around me, you couldn't go to like a local guitar store, or in this case, a knife store, and find one of Michael's knives on the shelf, right? Or go find one of these cool custom guitars or amps at my local podunk music store. I had to actually go buy one to be able to touch one. Mm-hmm. And I think we have a very interesting thing today where the population of buyers feels massively larger than it was three or 4 years ago.
It certainly is.
The population of makers is massively larger than it was 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah. And even though there's no question that shows are busier today than they were in the past.
Oh God, yeah.
Most of that exists in social media or other vaporware kind of context, mm-hmm. right? I think I'm going to take just a completely wild ass guess that the population of buyers is, say, 5 times larger than it was 3 or 4 years ago. I don't see 5 times as many people at shows,
customers or makers,
and
same people
or makers, right? But that's the shortcut, right? If I'm not going to go buy every knife that I think is cool and play with it and then turn around and sell it so I can afford to buy the next knife that I want to check out to play with and turn around and sell it, the only alternative to that is to go to a show, right? Because it's like going to the library. You get to play with it for free.
Well, that's what I always tell people that are hesitant to pick stuff up. I'm like, that's what you come to a show for.
That's what we're here
exactly.
for.
I know. It really is. And like one of the things, I've got a buddy here in town, Scott Hansen, who makes knives, and Scott makes really good knives. And I've got 3 of his folders. And I was trying to tell him before the show, he's like, he's a little hesitant. And he's like, I don't feel like I'm at a level where I can even do a lottery, right? Like I just don't feel like I'm at a level that I deserve to do a lotto. So I'm just going to do first come, first serve at the Kentucky Custom Knife Show. And his knives were gone in 15 seconds, right? So in 15 seconds, which is awesome for him, right? Awesome. It shows the demand is there. He's got a really cool following. I love his stuff. He does great hand rubs, really nice, elegant folders. But there's a lot of dudes that at the show that he wants to be customers that didn't get to handle his knives, right? And that's right. That's one of the issues, and that's what makes shows so important. Is one, you get to experience stuff in real life, and you get to meet people. I remember I had this idea of who Michael Birch was. I remember, Michael, I bought one of your knives. Like I bought a Dow back in the day when I was in Ohio, and it had an issue, and all I needed to do was to put oil on the detent track, right? But I was so dumb and technically a noob at the time, and I sent you a PM. Hello, sir. My name is Justin Laffer, and I'm a great fan of your work. And and I imagine Michael is this stately old man making these Asian influenced knives. And I met him, and
he is. The old part's getting true now.
Yeah, that old part is getting true for all of us. Yeah. But I remember meeting you and being like, oh, that's a dude, that I would hang out with, right? Like that's not someone I'm, for the most part, I was also young and immature, but that's not somebody that I'm intimidated by. Right? That's a dude that I can tell dick and fart jokes with, right?
And we do.
And that's what the relationship, and that's the relationship I have now with Michael, is that we trade a lot of dick and fart jokes and memes. And memes.
I just want to cut in here and say that one, every time someone calls someone a flipper, I think we should all audibly gasp. And 2, if you start a goth band, you have to call it Bleeding Edge.
Bleeding fucking it. Yeah. I would love to start a goth.
I know you would.
Like sort of like a Sushi and the Banshees meets like, like some sort of like modern, backpack hip hop type of thing. I'm seeing it. I'm creating. The problem is that I have no discernible skill or talent that has been made manifest yet. I'm still waiting for that moment of greatness to occur. And meh.
Yeah, well, we'll circle back around to the shows. What shows are the must-go-to shows for you, and what do you dislike and like in a show?
Well, shit. Well, all right. Blade Show, Atlanta. I live in Nashville. The reason I've been able to go to Blade Show every year is because it's close to me, right? It's a 3-hour drive. To say that Blade Show is a must go, yeah, at one time in your life, you should go to Blade Show. It's a giant industry show. It's cool. It's big. It's hot. It's sweaty. It's miserable. And you deserve to suffer through that awful shared cultural experience one time in your life, right? If I didn't live in Nashville, I probably wouldn't go to Blade Show as many times as I have, right? The Gathering is cool. The Gathering is more of an insiders, type of show where you get to see people that you really know, and there's less of the dude selling swords out of a bucket type of situation, and more listen, I love a good bucket sword as much as the next guy, right? But it's more of a,
I think that's not at all.
What's that?
Not at all. Nobody loves those bucket swords.
Oh, no, man. Yeah. Now my kids did. Shade loves them.
Right,
Kane loved them.
Come on.
All he had was $5, but by God, he could get a sword.
Yeah.
Don't rain on that parade, Tom.
For every ass, man.
Suck it, Tom.
So the Gathering is more of a personal thing. You've got to deal with Las Vegas, though, right? Las Vegas is an issue for some people.
Awesome.
I like it. I got sober 3 years ago, so Las Vegas is less of a drinking opportunity for me and more. And it's amazing because I used to go to Las Vegas and just drink myself into a stupor and just be hungover and as shit coming back. Now I go to Las Vegas and it's like free. I don't gamble, I don't drink, and it's so it's so lovely. Like Las Vegas is like this wonderful city that makes its intentions very clear. Right? Las Vegas is there for a transactional relationship with you. You give us money, and we will forget about all the things that you do here and give you a really sumptuous time. Right? And
right.
And it's kind of like, I love how honest Las Vegas is as a city. It's a very direct and honest experience for me now. Listen, the Kentucky Custom Knife Show is interesting, right? It started off, with Sean, you can attest to this. It started off with a few of us getting together as a USN get together in at some restaurants in Kentucky, right? And it was for people that were as far down as Alabama, and even some people I think from maybe Louisiana started coming to the first ones. But there was about 10 or 15 of us, maybe 20 of us at some of these, and we got together, and a few dudes who were there happened to be makers, and some of those makers brought knives. And it was never about the buying of knives. It was always about going and hanging out with some people that you thought were pretty cool in that sort of southern Midwestern area. And buying. And at the end of the thing, it was like a surprise. Like, oh, hey, Sean brought a knife. Oh, hey, Jeremy Horton brought a knife. Right? That was like, whoa. That was sort of like a little added on bonus. And it's turned into something, right? It's turned into this show, like the Southern show, a show for the craft brew junkies, a show for people that like bourbon, a show for people that like the more, sort of an, I don't want to say avant-garde, but it's kind of more of a sort of like an edgy EDC type of quality to it, right? It's a little harder to get to, right? It's a little hard. You have to be in the group and you have to wait for a ticket drop, right? Listen, it's interesting. It's interesting what it's become. This is the first year I've seen it where there was a line of people waiting to get in, which was sort of like an eye-opening experience for me, to see something, like they evolve into that, right? Good, right? I mean, now people are flying in, right? It's not the show for us dudes that lived in the Mid-South region. It is a completely a U.S. show that people from all over come to it. So it's lost a little bit of that regional vibe. I've never been to TKI. TKI doesn't interest me. I don't do fancy knives. I probably, it's one of those situations where I would probably really enjoy it if I went. And it's one of those situations where I probably boxed myself in and made presumptions about stuff that I would really enjoy if I violated those presumptions, but I just have never done it. I usually limit myself to 2 shows a year.
Well, this year was my first year for the Kentucky show, and it blew me away. It was pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's cool.
I could have driven there, but I chose to fly in.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I think part of what makes that show so awesome is it's in Lexington. There's not a whole lot else to do.
I know. God.
And there's one hotel that everybody stays in, and so everybody just hangs out in the hotel.
Yeah.
It's like a big playground.
It's a little, in some ways, there's a little bit of gathering kind of feeling to it for that reason, at least for me, because I mean, when we go to the gathering, it's like same thing. Everybody stays at the venue. And I mean, we venture out for dinner and stuff, but for the most part, everybody's kind of all in one spot. So there's a lot of direct the social part of it in the show are not separate, right? Yeah. They're sort of combined into one big event that takes all weekend.
Yeah. And you just, any collector, you got to go to these shows because all the nuance, all the cool shit is about meeting, one, you're never going to get an opportunity to buy one of these knives that you want unless you go to a show and enter a lottery, right? The same people win these lotteries year after year because they go to every show and enter the lotteries, right? If you don't go to the shows, you can't win the lottos. So that's the cold hard facts of it. But it's also really interesting to meet these people that, you sort of build up mythologies in your head of either good or bad of who this person is and what they represent. And then seeing how they conduct themselves in person is a very interesting situation.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, the way I look at it, your shows like The Gathering, shows like Kentucky, they have a different vibe than Blade Show. Blade Show has a pretty much any more straight trade show feel, whereas Gathering in Kentucky, you have a real fan convention vibe there. You get what I'm saying?
That's accurate.
It's a trade show versus a con.
That's a good way of putting it right there.
I think the TKI show is very interesting.
Yeah, that was actually the word I would use.
I think... Yeah, I know you're not into those knives, Justin, but I think if you could go and participate just to see how that all goes down, it's very interesting to watch. The whole show is a trip.
I've got to, because I mean, if anything, what I've tried to preach to myself is one of the better lessons is that you don't know what you really like, right? Like you have this idea of what you really like, but you don't know what you really like until you get out there and start to experience some shit. And listen, if I've got any sort of validity in what I say, I need to get out there and try something like that and see what TKI is about.
Yeah, it's definitely different. It's, people pay a lot of money to get into that show. One of the interesting parts, and this is one of the things that I actually really like about the Kentucky show, is just like TKI, they're short, right? Mm-hmm. They're a few hours long and it's in an evening and you're done. Mm-hmm. It's not I got to go spend the whole weekend and whatever, right? I mean, you can kind of get in and have a good time and see your friends and look at some cool shit, and then you can get out. And anymore, that's kind of where I'm at. I actually really like that part of it.
Yeah.
But TKI, I think because the knives tend to be very expensive at the show, and the cost of entry is quite high compared to other shows, right? A couple $100 to get in the door. Mm-hmm. There's an interesting vibe. It's very, there's a lot of sharks in the water at TKI. It's a trip.
It's almost like a formal business transaction. Everyone's there to do business in a way, but it's all very kind of,
and it's frantic.
Yeah. It's different.
Like helter skelter.
I think Steve's trying to do things to make that a little bit better. I know he's really trying, and
that's a tough one. Steve does good at his shows. I mean,
it's a cool show. I like it. It's a different vibe. You can't mix the con side of that. Like, he was like Sean was talking about into this 2 hours or 3 hours or whatever it is. It just didn't quite work that way.
TKI is not that show for sure. It's definitely different and very interesting. I think, I've not gone to it as a collector. I've always been there with Michael, helping out at his table, taking care of stuff with all the lottery thing that happens. But that it presents a very interesting perspective to stand on that side of the table at that show, because it's wow, this is a trip.
It'd be interesting. I think you'd enjoy checking it out at least once, Justin.
I think so.
I'll check it out. I'm going to make a priority out of it.
Justin, I've got a question for you. I want to circle back just real quick for one thing. When we talked about some materials that you liked and didn't like, you didn't like copper, which kind of made me cry a little bit.
I know, and I love your hammered copper.
Same with Zerg.
Yeah.
Both those materials are really nice. For me, it's weird. I can't smell copper. I don't know what it is, but I never have been able to smell copper. But, it makes me wonder, how far are you going to go here? Are you going to double down? I was just curious what your favorite steel was.
Oh, Jesus.
Or if you have a steel you don't like.
D2. This is the real question. what the hell would I know about steel? Right? Having all the knives I've owned, right? I've had everything, and I know it's not steel, but I've had everything from SM100 to Stellite to 1095 to 204P, all the stuff, right? There has been, in my well over 15, 20 years of collecting, the times I've actually noticed a difference in steel is maybe once. Right? Like maybe once or twice.
Right.
Like, I like the idea of it, but let's be real here. I'll never know. I sharpen my knives. The only knives I sharpen, right, are my kitchen knives on a Spyderco Sharp Maker. I strop my knives on a leather strop that I have, and I do a very piss poor job of it. When I need a knife sharpened, after a few years, I usually send it back to the maker to get sharpened, or like on my Scott Cook Lock show that I got 2 years ago, I hit a staple on cutting open a box. I didn't realize that there was a staple, and I chipped the edge, sent it to Scott, and within a day, my knife came back. It's S90V without the chip in it. Right? He took care of it.
Nice.
He's awesome that way. But I could tell you some ideas of what I like and stuff. I like tool steel because I like the idea of tool steel. I like stuff that doesn't, stainless because it doesn't rust. And I'm a sweaty, salty dude that tends to easily cause rusting in steel. I would say my favorite steel is 3V because I like the idea of a tough steel like 3V, but I really don't fucking as a collector, it's just such sophistry of us to think that like some steel is the best. Now, for you guys, for makers, right? Totally. I get that you have to grind it, you have to work with it, you have to know it, to trust it, to put your name on it, and to put your signature on it. It has to represent you. From a collector standpoint, nah.
That might
That's
be
a good
one of the
answer.
most honest collector, knife steel answers ever.
Even people that use knives, I think probably 80, it's got to be a large percentage. 80-90% never actually use one of the steels to the limit,
No. And they'll like the idea. If you had told them that it was ATS 34, right? If it was ATS 34 and you told them it was S30 and they thought that they paid a certain price point, right? People think that they deserve a certain steel based upon the price of a knife. This is much more prevalent in the production knife market, right? Like, well,
Right.
Spyderco's charging an extra $100 for that, but it does have M390, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what the hell will you know? I like buying certain Spydercos because the color of G10 is different, right? like that's
Right.
my basic bro ass, like the real reason behind why I buy stuff.
Well, I really think that companies and makers are probably done a disservice because it's like the steel is the thing that you can see. You can't see the heat treat. You can't see, you can see the geometry, but those two things I think have just as much or more to do with performance as the steel,
Mm-hmm.
especially the heat treat.
Yeah.
Something you can't see, but the steel is actually quantitative.
Right. And it's marketable. It can be put into a context that makes people want stuff. And then, knife reviewers that have Patreon accounts can talk about the value of having a certain steel as opposed to another. And it creates this entire, this circulatory market presence of, 204P is really the gold standard of 2018, and it'll be something. I remember back when S30V was the real step up, right? I remember when S30 was coming out. Yeah. And it was designed by a knife maker, right? And now you put S30V on a folder and people say that it's boring and it chips. I've never had, I just told you about S90V chipping on a staple that I really dug into. I've not really had a lot of bad experiences with steel. I like stuff that I think of as tough, that I think has, again, it functions with the symbolism and the sort of totem quality of these little trinkets and toys that we play with. As I like the idea of something. It really, in the grand functional scheme of thing, doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of difference.
We want to feel like we can survive any situation with whatever knife we have in our hands, and that's just the bare bones of it. We're not going to have to, but we want to feel like we can.
I bought this what is this? But an S7 fixed blade that was like a 1/4 inch thick. And, just knowing that it was S7, like that was a steel meant for jackhammers, right? Like, oh, whoa, that's killer, right? Like, yeah, like
on a tool made to cut.
Oh, yeah, tool made to gently separate materials.
Right.
Well, I got tagged in a thread on Facebook about someone besmirching D2, which is crazy, right?
Who would do that?
I don't know, but I started to post, and I did post a couple times, and then I just decided, just because they don't like D2 doesn't mean they don't like my D2, and
Right.
so I actually just walked away from that. But not all D2 is the same, not all geometry is the same, not all heat treat's the same, and it's I
And
decided to
Tom,
myself that it was
not all Facebook groups are the same either.
yeah. Well,
Right.
I decided that it was just not worth arguing that argument.
No, it's tough to argue with the collective knowledge of Facebook knife experts with their decades of experience that bests Tom Krine's knowledge of an articulation of steel.
Sometimes you got to just kind of shake your head at some of the stuff said and go, all right, I'm not going to engage.
Okay,
There's no reason for it.
This is fine.
Yeah, everything is fine. Everything is fine.
This is fine.
All right, I got a question for you. What would be for you like the actual grail, not the word that we use all the time that means the knife I'm going to buy next week and sell. I'm talking about the unachievable grail knife that you aren't going to get, but you'd love to get.
Man, I don't even know if it exists anymore. Like I used to have an idea of it, like a Rexford Mini Epicenter, because that was like a knife I told myself I was going to get before I was married. And God, I was married 6 years ago, right? And I thought like
that's a good thing.
I know. I thought I was going to get it, but man, it's just like my tastes have changed so much. And it's not that I don't like Rexford Epicenters. They're awesome, right? But man, I don't know. My whole like concept of a grail has sort of changed. Like I don't want there's no questing after a certain knife or a certain watch. I really, and this is going to sound so lame and so like Buddhist of me, right? But really what I'm trying to focus on is enjoying the shit I have and like and the opportunities that are present for me. Like I'm really trying to focus on, hey, I have got a David Santiago order coming up relatively soon, right? It's going to be one of his Tonto model, but in a buoy with a non-flipper and a thumb stud, right? That's a cool knife. Like just sort of thinking and sort of being present in like appreciating the fact that knife is coming for me, not dwelling too much on the fact that he owes me a knife, right? No, I haven't paid any money. It's just the idea that I have an order coming up is something that makes me happy and sort of the anticipate. I feel like a kid on Christmas again, I feel that nice, pleasant, expectant feeling of, ooh, cool. That's fun. I'm excited for that. So I try and focus on stuff that's available to me and appreciate it in the context of how it is available. Does that make sense with that? I totally got around that question.
No, that's a good attitude to have in collecting. We spend so much time focusing on what we can't have that we forget about the stuff that we do have or the stuff that is, like you said, attainable. And we should be enjoying that stuff more.
Yeah. I just try and focus on like one, not selling a knife unless I've had it for a year. That's a rule that I keep for myself. Sometimes I violate that rule if I don't like a knife or if somebody makes an offer for me, but I try and keep something for a year and then evaluate it again after a year has come and gone. And that has dramatically changed the velocity of my knife collecting, but it's also dramatically increased my enjoyment of knife collecting. That sort of just that steadfast rule for myself, keep it for a year before you consider flipping it, has allowed me to find nuance and meaning and context in some pieces that I otherwise would have just moved on. And that philosophy of the next thing, that high that collectors get from next, show it, picture of it, next.
Yeah.
It's really detrimental. It's detrimental to me because I fall so easily into addiction and into that high, right? That's something that I have to be very conscious of avoiding. And it's something that I think is a very temporary benefit from what we're trying to achieve as collectors. and it's fleeting and ephemeral, and you need more of it. The only thing that you want is more. And with that type of collecting methodology, you're only going to have disappointment in your pursuit.
Well, I think it goes
the
back,
more that you
go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that goes back to like the social media thing. It's chasing those likes, and I think that's unhealthy. You know, so I think you've got a good attitude on collecting nowadays of going back, because sometimes you sell it, then you see so many people that'll be like, oh, I wish I hadn't have sold that. Well, hold on to it like you do now, and look at it again, and you'll see why you bought it probably the first time. And if you don't see it, then sell it.
Yeah, and listen, I violate that rule too, right? Like I'm not I'm not some flipper. Saint or anything. Like I am the dirtiest of flipper. I've profited off of so many EDC bros, and they have helped pay for my down payment on my house, right? But I try and hold myself to some semblance of a standard of how I want to do things, and I've made lots of mistakes and tried to right the ship in some way based upon, the feelings I've got. Like, oh, I didn't like the way that felt. Let's go somewhere where it feels good, Because again, this is, I write for a living. I do marketing for a living. I work very hard and I enjoy what I do, but this is my pastime. This is where I felch out a little bit of joy and enjoyment for myself, right? So if I'm not enjoying it, I need to get the fuck out. I need to hit the eject button as quickly as possible. And I see so many dudes in this community who maybe it's just the presence that they have on social media, but they seem to hate it. Like they seem to actually loathe collecting knives.
Yes.
And yet they're desperately involved in it, right? Yeah. Maybe they want change. Maybe they have these rose-colored glasses of a better past. I was back in that past. I don't remember it being that much better, by the way. But they have this sense of everything was so good in the past and we've lost our direction and things suck. And God, I can't stand how bad the custom knife community is. Get out. Yeah. Man, this is a pastime we're supposed to fucking enjoy. I do shit that's hard for a living. I don't want to deal with the awfulness of that in this thing that I really love, and I love the people involved in it, and I do love the dickering that's involved with the horse trading and the personalities and seeing all the same characters, and finding new friends and losing friends, and I enjoy the drama of it, the sensibilities involved, the aesthetics, I dig all of it, and I try and squeeze out as much joy and happiness from it as possible.
Well, I think we've talked about this before, Justin. We've actually had some of this conversation on the USN before too, where I know, because I see the people doing it, and I know based on some shit that you've been through in your life, you can see it too, right? You know how to identify it. People are doing the next, right? They're moving at such a high rate of speed sometimes that they're blowing right on by understanding what's going on, even for themselves.
All the beauty that's in this world is in the subtlety and the details. And when you're just trying to get that next high, I would have flipped that Loksha, the Scott Cook Loksha, in a second, right? If I wanted, to buy something for $900 and sell it for $3,000, right? And to get the next little EDC item, and I would have lost the sense of context, the sense of meaning, the sense of where that fits in my personal journey. And I'm sounding like a Hallmark card, but that's where I get the joy from it, And if I were to just quick flip that shit, I wouldn't get a lot of enjoyment. And there's also the enjoyment of motherfuckery, right? The fact that I have that and somebody else doesn't, and I have a witty banter and repertoire with that person, and I get to play with that relationship and play with that emotion and have sort of a little tete-a-tete with them. That's fun. I enjoy that. I value that. And that sometimes it's worth more to me than the profitability of a knife. And sometimes it's not. And sometimes I sell it and I'm a dirty flipper.
Right. Now it's an interesting thing because I've some of the stuff that we're talking about, you can't reach that point with collecting or with this whole hobby or whatever without having gone through the cycle maybe multiple times. And so
time takes time, and there's no quick way around time.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, sometimes I look at people that are newer to it and I'm like, oh, dude, this is what's going to happen to you next. Right. And that sounds douchey and like I'm all knowing or something. But I mean, I've been there, right? I understand what they're going through or about to go through or what they're dealing with. And yes, stuff changes over time, but
there's patterns.
I don't know.
There certainly is
patterns. It's easy to get burned out on. Sometimes you have to step back, right? Sometimes life helps you step back. And I don't know. It's an interesting thing.
And Mark, are you in the same way? I mean, we talk about, I still feel like I'm new to this. I still feel like I'm, I got into it and, casually in the mid 90s and really hot and heavy around 2007 to 8. I still feel like I'm very new to this. And I remember all those peoples of those get-togethers, the Eric Max of the world. Those are the dudes that were the OGs to me, right? Like this EDC OG status that is thrown around, man. Like, man, there's so many old timers that have so much collected knowledge and wisdom of all the chicanery and bullshit and cool stories and ups and downs of the characters involved. Man, I'm just scratching the surface of all the cool and weird and eccentric elements of this community.
Right. And, I think some of it's hard because a lot of the people that were involved in earlier, some years ago were very attached to the forum thing. And many of them are still there. They are disinterested in social media, which I 100% understand. Because it's full of fuckery and dipshittery and fuckboyness and whatever other made up word you want to use. And it's like it's a lot harder. It feels a lot harder to peel all that back and get to, the real people part of it or
the realness of it, the honesty, the good,
honest interaction with other people part of it. Yeah. I mean,
I was a big forum guy, and I'm still on the forums. I just don't post as much because it's tougher. It's a harder medium to get your claws into, and it's a lot of the makers that I liked from the forums were driven away, and found more attractive ways of controlling their destiny on social media. Right? I don't besmirch anybody that, and the thing, I find a lot of great people on all the places. And some of those guys didn't come over. A lot of good guys did come over too, and I really enjoy interacting.
Right.
I mean, Mark, you and I talk all the damn time, I mean, you and I used to talk on the USN and we talk now on Instagram and another social media, it's not the same, but nothing's the same.
No.
And it's not going to be the same. And holding on to the past, man, I hope it works out well for you. Yeah. But I don't see that as like a,
No, it's like I said, when I see people that are new to it, I think, what a crazy fucked up minefield. Not that again, I don't think I idealize the forum scene too much. Maybe I do, but because it had its fair share.
Oh, totally. And we look back at it with rose-colored glasses too, right?
Yeah.
But there is the idea of it. Then the honest, there was the old egalitarian model that we hold up and we try to broshido it up.
Right. I don't know. I just think it's a much bigger minefield today than it was. Maybe it's just because of the breadth, right? Maybe the holes are all the same. They're just bigger because the population's bigger, or
it's bigger and it's faster, man. The mistakes happen quicker. You don't have, I got my new dude who I went to school with. He's buying and collecting stuff, and I try and tell him, like, listen, don't buy from this guy. You're not going to enjoy yourself. You're probably going to sell it, but he's got to make those mistakes. Like, somebody telling you that mistake is not the same as you making that mistake. Like, and this is a funny little anecdote I have. Like, I never trust a reviewer unless they bought a knife, right? Like, there's a big difference between getting a knife in the mail and being like, oh, I would totally spend $680 on this and I think it's great, right? And sending it back or getting it for free like a lot of those dudes do, right? And there's a big difference between working hard, spending your cash, waiting for a USPS box, getting it, signing it, or the postman not delivering it to you and having the next day to go in the winter and, get it from the post office and getting it and then being disappointed, right? That's a big fucking difference in the experience, in spending
there's no investment.
There's none. And getting something for free and thinking that your concept of the knife is in any way sure, we think that we have objectivity, right? Objectivity is a myth, right? It's a complete
it's a concept.
It is a con job that reviewers do to get more Patreon. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm on a little Patreon, but listen, is a big difference between doing it and then hearing about it, getting it for free and spending the money. And until somebody spends the money, right? Like, it's not really theirs, right? You didn't really earn it. You didn't really buy it. How do you know what it's like to get something, to really like have invested and saved up to get something? And the same way with these mistakes, until somebody's screwed you over, like I've been screwed over, right? Until somebody's taken you for a long con, until somebody's taken some down payment money and screwed you over that way, you need to get those scars. You need to get those calluses from the community and to learn what it's like on the bad way so you can really appreciate the good shit, right? You need to have some shitty Chinese knives to appreciate a Sebenza. A Sebenza is only amazing in the context of everything else in the production world. You need that context to understand what quality is.
Yeah.
Yep. Well said.
Very much.
So let's try to finish the story.
All right. So Ohio. Yeah, Ohio. I go to I started going to Blade Show, right? And then my sort of like my real experience of like doing stuff is, somebody saw that I was going to Hinder Knives get-togethers and getting some cool shit. And this was a very big custom knife collector. And he asked me to start doing some buying for him. And so this custom knife collector was probably maybe the second, maybe the first, and I don't think he was the biggest collector, but probably the second largest collector during that period of time. And he started flying, I had to fly myself out to Las Vegas, but he said, hey, if you're in Las Vegas, would you take this cash with you and bid on some knives for me? So I got very accustomed with the buying process of custom knives, buying some knives that I bought for an ungodly amount of money. I mean, I think I bid on a knife for him that cost in excess of $20,000, right? And it was very nerve wracking for me to be responsible for somebody else's money and to do that. And it was all open bid stuff. And that's sort of how I got very familiar with a lot of custom knife makers really fast, was working for this buyer. It was fun while it lasted. He and I had a very good relationship. And then he had somebody else do it. That was a lot of pressure. And I really wanted to be slow and enjoy myself. But that was sort of like I quickly shotgunned a lot of knowledge, a lot of information, a lot of fuckery, a lot of strangeness of the knife community really quickly doing that for him. Then I graduated with my master's degree, came to Nashville to work and ostensibly to get my PhD, and moved to Nashville. And that's sort of how I got situated with sort of like the Tennessee contingent of knife collectors. It's how I got to be friends with Jeremy Horton, who is like probably my oldest friend in the knife community. He and I do a lot of cool, fun stuff together. We went to a concert the other month together. Being in Nashville and him being, like an hour and a half away is cool. Right. We've got some good people here. We've got some terrible people here, but we've got people here who collect, and it's been fun being here in Nashville and seeing sort of how this sort of like, West Tennessee, Southeastern type of situation has developed. And, because it used to be sort of, California heavy or East Coast heavy. And so the South had sort of a renaissance in terms of makers and collectors. And that almost takes us up to sort of like the modern time of me and sort of I've chilled out a lot in what I collect. I like to collect stuff from friends. I like to collect stuff from people I enjoy. And I still fuck around with production knives. I mean, like Tom, I bought one from you today, right? Like I still enjoy Spyderco's. I still enjoy the occasional Benchmade if it's good. And I enjoy seeing some of the stuff that's coming out of China. I haven't bought anything yet from China, but like going to see and like, again, this is the importance of going to shows. There's the idea of Chinese knives, right? That they're made in these giant Foxconn factories that are pumping out iPhones and knives, right? And then you go to Blade Show and you talk to these guys who are factory owners who are trying to make really high quality products, and you know, you see them as a human being, you know, not as just that foreign other thing, and you start to appreciate them. And what they do and the level of passion and the level of professionalism that they have for their product. And it's cool. Again, I haven't gone out and bought a Riot. I did buy a Riot. That's not true. I bought one a few years ago. But you know, like or some of the other guys that are coming out, I find it very interesting. There's a lot about this marketplace and this community that I enjoy. There's a lot of it that I don't like, but for the most part, I find it very entertaining and fun.
Yeah, fun, even from like the human being perspective, right?
Yeah,
even from the human interaction side of it.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many cool collectors that I've met and like people that I'm really good friends with, and then people who I've gotten into collecting knives that you know hadn't been, you know, collectors before. Not that I'm like an influencer or anything like that, but they're like, hey, I bought this, you know, this Gerber, right? Is there something else I should check out? Because I enjoy playing with it. I enjoy having it and I enjoy the design aspects of it, but it's kind of shitty. Is there something else I should check out? And then you're like, oh yeah, totally. You need to upgrade to blank, right? Knowing that person and like knowing their budget, right?
Right.
That's fun. It's cool because we're like these weird obsessive types that, again, as I said at the beginning, 99% of the world thinks that we're stupid for spending more than $50 on a knife, and they're right. Right? Like we we are this strange small minority that enjoys eccentricity and weirdness and talismans and toys that we get to carry around with us.
Yeah, let's edit out that part that says that people buying our knives are stupid. No, I agree. I can't imagine not enjoying, you know, your hobby or what you do for a living, you know, and staying with it. I had someone ask today that I've known for a long time. They were like, "Are you still having fun?" I'm like, "Yeah." Mm-hmm. That's what makes me get up in the morning.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's impossible to get there. I've certainly had points in not so distant past where I kind of became largely disinterested, right? Like, I don't know, you know, I'm not buying knives anymore, or I haven't bought knives in a long time, or whatever. And most of it had to do with other stuff, but I don't know. I think it's healthy and okay to step back and reassess, why am I doing this?
Sure.
What part of it do I really enjoy? And you know, a little while ago, I got a new knife, you know, that Big Bear that David Sharp built for me. And that was, I was actually excited. And I told David, I said, this is the first time I've really been excited about a knife in a long time. And that's kind of cool, right? Because it's like, okay, what about this makes me happy, right? Why am I so excited about this thing? And if you take the time to slow down and think about that piece of it, I think you can help yourself a lot. At least I could.
Absolutely. And the thing is, too, is that sometimes we decry the state of our community, the state of our industry, and we think that somehow there's something else better out there, right? Like, I guarantee you, in every single you think that the politics in knives are bad, go into the watch community, right? You think that the trolling in the knife community is bad, go into the gun community. Like, everything in all these other industries are larger, more exaggerated, the stakes are higher, it's worse, the people are more predatory, and, you know, as you know, it's we've got a good little slice of an attainable slice of happiness here, and I hope to to get a couple more years of enjoyment out of it.
Right. All right. Well, it's been a very interesting conversation so far. We have some kind of goofy, fun questions to go through. So, Michael, you want to hit one?
Yeah. What your knives in the movies? What's one of your favorites of that?
I mean, I know it's cliche, but what is the Tommy Lee Jones? What is that movie called? The Hunted. Yeah, The Whisk. When I first saw The Whisk, and I read about it, and like I did, so I must have spent days researching whisks and the design back in the day when I was first getting into knives. Like, I've got no business owning a whisk whatsoever. I'm not out in the woods. I mean, I like hiking, I like biking, but I'm not out doing any wood processing, right? But that was for me like the movie knife that really lit a fire under my ass.
It was pretty damn cool. Cool design, man.
It was
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
I've never heard anyone call it the whisk before, though.
The WSK, right?
Yeah. I'm just,
I was really.
Yeah,
Oh, maybe. Listen, maybe that's a Laffer invention. I don't.
I don't know.
I've heard it before. I've heard it referred to as that before for what that's
all right.
worth. But it may have been you, so what the fuck does it matter?
That's the fuckery is recursive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sean, you got a fun question you wanted to ask?
Yeah, man. What's one of your guilty pleasure knives?
Oh, I got you. I saw it at Blade Show. I don't think they've been in a few years. There was a knife out there called the Wasp knife, right?
Mm-hmm.
This Wasp knife, ready for this? The purpose of the knife, you ready for this shit? The purpose of the knife was to blow up sharks. The purpose of the knife was to explode a shark. Like, that is insane. Like, if I had the chance to buy a knife that explodes sharks, I don't think I could afford not to buy that knife, right? Like that would be just completely irresponsible of me not, like, you have an opportunity to buy a knife that blows up sharks. I'm buying that. I'm having that.
Well, opportunity squandered if you pass that up.
A lot of shark sightings in Nashville, too, so you got to be careful.
We do have a scuba store.
Right.
I wonder why we have a scuba. Like, is anybody out there and, like, out in the river just, okay.
The Wasp, yeah. I remember. I think the first time I saw that, somebody must have posted it on USN or something, because I remember.
Oh, the promotional videos of the Wasp. Oh, do you remember? There's also this other one. There was this knife that came out. I think they sold the design to a few different companies, but it was like one of those first like knives with a finger hole in it. I want to say it wasn't Medford, but it sounded something like Medford. But the guy said it was like a steel that was laminated together with an explosion.
Oh, yes.
There was a promotional video where he's like, "Do you know how we make this steel? We fucking explode it." And he was like, "Puff is." He was like, the maker of the knife was like this, like the dude, the original saxophone player from the beginning of Lost Boys, playing "I Still Believe," right? Like, I still believe. He looked like the original sax player from Lost Boys, and he had this promotional video with like his wife, who was in like short tactical shorts, and they were talking about the benefits of their explosion forged steel. That would be a guilty pleasure. I would like to get a knife that was exploded.
Yes.
In the forging process.
Awesome.
Wonderful answers, both.
Yeah.
I'll look up what that dude's name was. That was Ludacris. Not Ludacris the rapper. It was Ludacris. He makes knives, but they're very sensible and not tactical at all.
Right.
So something I've heard of is the Laffer effect. What exactly is the Laffer effect?
The Laffer effect is a myth that was postulated back in like the mid 2000s, like the 2010ish period, when I was buying and flipping a lot of knives and trying to find new makers. And so the Laffer effect was the idea that if I owned a knife, that somehow it was more valuable, right? That's not true at all. And I have the financial records to show that that's not true. But the funny thing was, like, the touch by Laffer, the Laffer effect, was because I was doing that shitty flipping thing and selling knives and prospecting, right? Tactical venture capitalism. And and that's sort of where that came from. And then, there's all these insular jokes that we have that sort of take on life in context and meaning of their own. And, that's one of them.
That's awesome.
Mittner Adams.
I didn't realize I would have put that on the off limits, by the way. If I had known that you sons of bitches would brought up
the Laffer effect. Yes.
We had the Laffer curve and the Laffer swerve too.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Birch, did you want to ask this meme question?
Might as well. He loves his memes. What's like the first one that really got you, that made you laugh, that still makes you go back and chuckle at every once in a while?
Doubtful dude at a he's in the club, he's got his hat on, and it's become the sort of like the meme that's sort of like, I posted it to my Instagram stories today. I use that. I go back to that well of him going all the time. That is like my favorite. I find so many uses for it, right? And again, my beginning was comic books, right? Images and text put together to create meaning that is greater than what they could have been separately, right? That's all a meme is. It's just creating contextual meaning through images and text put together that could be greater than the sum of their parts. That's why I dig it.
I totally expected you to say, that's all a meme is. It's fucking art. I don't understand what people don't understand about it.
It's called fashion, sweetheart. Learn about it.
Try it on for size sometime.
Yeah. It's called art. You wouldn't understand. So what was the one I love was just because nobody understands you doesn't mean that you're an artist. That's one of my favorite put downs that I think somebody told me in college.
That's fantastic.
Brutal. Right in the feels. Right in the feels.
Oh, too funny. All right. Well, that was a lot of fun, Justin. Thanks for joining us and telling us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, it was awesome.
There was.
Do we want to do the what's going on in the shop thing?
Sure.
So, Tom, Justin bought a knife from you today. I bought a knife from you today. Clearly, today was a good day because I don't buy a lot of knives these days. Mm-mm. So, the fact that I bought a knife from you today and Justin bought a knife from you today, that
was pretty fun.
If I might say so, you should feel honored.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Do you feel it's validated as it sounds like you should be?
Yeah, man. My fingers hurt from regrinding all those, but
there was a bunch of them.
Yeah, pretty crazy. That was a fun.
Tom did a bunch of Spyderco regrinds, which curiously aligns with the epic failure of his Jetta. I might note.
Yeah. Yeah. My Jetta died today. Pulled up to the shop, smoke's coming out, temperature gauge was high, popped the hood, oil's all over the engine compartment, none actually in the engine. So apparently I'm going car shopping.
Right.
Have you tried regrinding the engine?
I've put so much money into that car. I'm to the point where it's like, if I could fix it for like $20, I probably wouldn't. Well, I would. I take that back. But yeah.
This is a Volkswagen?
Yeah.
I just had that situation. I had to sell my GTI last year. I love that car, but it got to the point where I had to fix the transmission for $5,000 and the car wasn't even worth that amount of money.
Nah. Yeah. My car's, we bought it new in 2002. So it's time.
I only have limited Volkswagen experience for obvious reasons, but my past experience suggests that you can't fix shit on a Volkswagen for $20.
No.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's been a good car, but yeah, it's time. So
Tom pulled up to the shop. The Volkswagen was kicking out smoke, and he shouts, "Frank, get the Spydercos out. We got to do some regrinds today."
Yeah. Daddy needs some money.
That's right.
Sadly, that was already done. So now I got to get some other stuff. But yeah, it's all good. We we also closed on the building next door this week. So
yeah,
congratulations on that.
Yeah,
pretty excited. That's a huge step forward to the school, which was a conversation, an idea that came up on a fishing trip with me and Birch and Jody.
Yeah.
And it's going to happen. I think it's slow and steady.
And the indoor go-kart track.
Dude, that's
taking your sweet ass time.
I know, hey, slow and steady.
Now you said you moved to the office to a different space in the shop, right?
Yeah, so we're recording in the back. I had to get a new computer, and so I figured that was a good time to set it up. We've got an office in the back of the shop, and that's so I can demo the front office where I've got cabinets coming, floor to ceiling, and gonna have a place to store my books on display and kind of change my office from kind of the dump it is to a more design studio type thing. But
new car,
I can't wait for that.
New car, new office, new building, new computer.
No money.
Damn.
You see a trend here.
Don't forget us, Tom.
Yeah.
Sean, what about you, man? Are you in taking a big deep breath after the show or what?
I got back out and worked a little today and helped Rachel with a knife she's working on, but I've
Nice.
just puttered here and there and did some stuff that needed doing, a little bit of just, shit that I've been putting off, like replacing the platen glass on my platen and doing some stuff with my sandblaster, and nothing too involved.
Yeah. How about you, Bert? You rearranged the grinding room, right?
Oh yeah, I'm jacking with that. Slowing down on the V4s. I've got one of Rob's new grinders coming. I'm pretty excited about that. The first KMG. That was like my first big boy grinder, and it's been with me, ever since. But yeah, he came out with a new one, and I sure shit, knowing me, picked it up, even though I didn't really need it. But it'll be exciting. So I'm changing stuff around, while it comes in.
That's exciting. New grinders are always fun.
Hell yeah.
Tools.
That's where all our money goes to.
Every time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Justin, one of the things that we've kind of started to do in the episodes at the end is to talk about something cool that you saw recently. It could be something cool you saw on Facebook or on the forums or on Instagram or whatever. It could be something cool you saw on TV. You see anything cool lately that you want to talk about?
I mean, the stuff that I like, you guys know Tom, Michael. I've talked to you guys about this, but I'm an Audible freak. When the reason why I don't listen to podcasts much is because I try and spend all my time listening to as much literature and history as possible. And I was talking to you guys, the book that there's two that I love. Joe Abercrombie's First Law series is like when we talk about Grail status, right? I love Joe Abercrombie's First Law series. It is everything that I've ever wanted in literature. I love it. I think it has literary merit. It's epic. It has literary merit. It is philosophical. It is dark. It is bright. It is this incredible journey that I've been on. And I just finished up Red Country, which is the last of the standalone novels. And I'm moving on to Sharp Ends, which is a collection of short stories that take place in the First Law world. But I'm an Abercrombie fiend. And he just announced that the next book will be published in September of 2019. So we just have about 10 months until the next of the First Law series comes out, which I'm super excited about. And then another Audible I listened to was Mary Beard, who is a British historian. Her book called SPQR, which is the history of Rome from 600 to about 400. And it is fantastic. A really great, if you like accessible history with some actual academic chops to it, but with a good narrative flow to it. I highly recommend that series and SPQR, the book, the standalone book, if you like history.
Nice. Definitely have to check those out.
Nerd. Sorry.
Dude, Abercrombie's character develop is
The best.
amazing.
Unparalleled. Like, I mean, we're talking like, and I hate to say this because I taught literature for a while, right? Like it is Don Quixote-esque in the way he develops flawed, amazing characters that continually like fuck up, but develop within their fuck. It's just incredible what he's done. And he doesn't miss on the books. Like some people say book 2 before they're hanged is just one giant journey. Yeah. But I loved it. Right. It's just, the series as a whole is just the best I've read. When it comes to fantasy, it's the best. Sci-fi, I'm a big Hyperion fan, but for me in fantasy, it's higher up for me than Name of the Wind. It's higher up than Game of Thrones or The Song of Ice and Fire. I love Abercrombie's stuff more than anything else I've read.
Awesome.
I can't say a word or we'd end up talking for a long time about it.
Yeah, I know.
we better wrap up.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So this is episode 21. And I think this is going to be, so we started this whole podcast thing almost a year ago, not quite, but getting real close to a year ago. So this has been what I think we're going to call season 1. And so Justin's episode will be the last full episode of season 1.
There's a lot of pressure on me that I didn't realize was
Yeah.
going to happen. I'm not very appreciative of that. I feel like I've left people, like I've left them my whole lives disappointed.
Right. We waited a whole year for this bullshit.
Oh,
So yeah, we're kind of wrapping up season 1. I think we're hoping that we're going to get another mini-sode out before the end of the year. And then we're probably going to take a little break for the holiday. And then, so we got a little merch thing coming up to get some cool things out there for the show and maybe give people an opportunity to help support the show a little bit, which would be nice. So end of season 1, it's kind of weird. It doesn't feel like we've been doing this a year, does it?
Kind of crazy.
Yeah.
It's been a lot of fun.
It has been a lot of fun. It's been educational. It's been very interesting, and we've had some very nice folks join us, and very appreciative of all of that stuff. So, I think that's pretty much it. Justin, thank you for joining us, my man.
It's been a pleasure, guys. Thank you. I'm very. I can't believe that somebody would listen to me for this long, and I wish you all the best.
That was a fun conversation.
Very.
Yeah, well, we really appreciate you joining us. I think we have some things that we did not get to in the conversation that I think we'd still like to talk about. So we reserve the opportunity to invite you back in the future, maybe for another conversation at some point.
The end of season 2. Catch them.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Laugh nasty. Season 2.
laugh nasty coming in hats.
Indeed. All right. Well, hey, thanks as always, everybody, for listening and for sticking with us for a whole year. It's hard to believe. And we'll catch you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks all.
Thank y'all.
To learn more about our makers, you can find Tom Crine on the web at crineknives.net, in his Facebook group, Crine Knives, or in his Instagram account at Crine Knives. For Michael Birch, check birchtreeblades.com, Facebook group Birch Tree Blade Works, or Michael's Instagram at birchtreeblades. For myself and the Raygun Bead Project, we're on the web at raygundivision.com. We have a Facebook group called Raygun Division, or my personal Instagram at msteiner. For those interested in photos, references from the show, or some discussion about the show itself, you can find us on the web at markofthemaker.com, in a Facebook group called Mark of the Maker, or on our Instagram at Mark of the Maker. Last but not least, the ultra cool and haunting background music we use for the show is a piece called Noir Guitar by Stevie's Amp Shack, found at the Free Music Archive and licensed under Creative Commons CC BY 4.0. Thanks for listening.